How did the
Mhm,
transition from education, ELA to UI or UX,
mhm.
how did that happen?
All right, so I was born on a Wednesday evening. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so I think in order to tell you the story of how a non-GIS professional, has ended up at a GIS professional company, we kind of have to break it apart. So I'll do like the first leg of the journey, which is education to UX design, and then how that UX design got me to Esri. So strap in, folks. I had been teaching for about 6 years at this point when COVID hit. My daughter was 3, and I had just given birth to my son on March 11th, and shutdown happened March 13th. So we are at peak pandemic time with remote virtual learning. And as much as I missed my classroom and my students, it was so nice to have time with my kids. And I realized that in 2 years, my daughter would be starting kindergarten. And it got me thinking, like, who is going to do her school drop off when her classes start at 8:15, but my classes start at 7:30? Who's doing pickup at 2:40 when I'm contractually obligated to stay on campus until 4 p.m.? Who's going to get her when she gets hurt or sick? When could I do her parent teacher conferences or back to school night? At the time, my husband worked in the film industry, so his schedule was bonkers at best. Watching my daughter receive awards, plays, classroom activities, I would be missing out on all of that because I would be teaching. If you're listening to this podcast and you have been a teacher or you are currently a teacher, the hassle it takes to find a sub and get classroom coverage and write up the sub plan, you know. So I literally Googled, what can I do with a teaching career that isn't teaching? And I got hits like tutoring. Oh, great. More work for less pay. That's what I want. And I kept seeing UX designer pop up in the articles. And I was like, what is that? I've never heard that before. But the more I dug into it, the more I was intrigued and terrified at the same time of a possible tech role. I I never saw myself as a like quote unquote like tech brain person or thought I'd ever work in a tech field, let alone for a tech giant like Esri. And I think growing up, that made me feel like the odd one out in my family. My mom had a degree in computer science. My dad had a master's in physics and worked for companies like McDonnell Douglas, which then became Boeing. My middle sister got a degree in tech information management. And, get this, my youngest sister got a double degree in aerospace
Oh,
engineering
wow.
and electrical engineering and a minor in material sciences. So, you know, and then there's me, the middle school English teacher. I I was that teacher who actually shunned the idea of too much tech in the classroom. We had online textbooks, but you better believe I got every single one of my students to have their own copy of Shakespeare in their hands so they could feel the book. So this nugget of possibly working in tech just didn't seem like it was the right fit for me or like I was right for it. So back to remote virtual learning classroom. And gosh, we must have been working on an assessment or something. And I have one student who's trying to virtually help troubleshoot a classmate of his because something wasn't working on his learning program. And I don't know what this kid did, but he fixed it. It must have been like less than 2.7 seconds. And he just pops on off to his virtual group, continues working. His other classmate continues working as well. And I'm just sitting back at my desk and I'm looking at this group of like 13, 14-year-olds in front of me in our Zoom class. And I have this epiphany that I'm witnessing the moment. I know my students know more than me about something. And I loved and hated that feeling. Like I'm super competitive. I will survive out of spite. Like, like don't get me wrong. Like that's the goal of any teacher or parent. You want the next generation to be set up for success, and you want them to do better and be better than what we currently are. But I thought I had more time. COVID and remote teaching fast forwarded what I thought I had years for my students to catch up to me, like where I was tech wise. But no, 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 no. These kids were running circles around me and I wasn't even clocking them. And that was such a humbling experience and a turning point for me. You know, what's fascinating about technology is that it is constantly evolving, and what's considered advanced today can be Stone Age within 5 years, even less. And I didn't want to be left behind in the dust or feel obsolete. I was in that moment. I'm just sitting there thinking, I don't know probably half the stuff my students know. Um, and and that epiphany, I had like another realization. So I am just getting like wave after wave after wave of like existential crisis. The reason I wasn't such a big proponent of tech in the classroom, it wasn't because I thought the kids would be too distracted or I wanted them to only feel pencil and paper in their hands. It was because I was afraid. I was afraid that I wasn't like my other family members, or I was afraid that I had missed my time in college to learn about stuff like this. You can always earn more money, but you can't ever earn more time. So I made a decision to leave teaching and do something with the time I have left with the skills that I have. So I kind of like sat and like drafted up like, okay, what do I what do I know how to do? I couldn't write Python or Java or CSS, but I could get 150 students to write me an argumentative essay about Shakespearean themes and A Midsummer Night's Dream. I wasn't a web or app developer, but I knew how to develop the love of reading in eighth graders who started the school year 3 to 4 grades below reading level. I couldn't read code, but I knew how to read people. I knew how to align strategies horizontally and vertically between grade levels and departments. I knew how to pivot in lesson plans when things went wrong, and they always went wrong. There's nothing you can do about that. I knew how to accept unsolicited feedback and separate myself from my designs, my lesson plans. Like if you've ever had 150 14-year-olds, they will tell you your lesson plan sucked, whether or not you asked for it. Okay. Um, I have never once regretted having worked in education. I fully believe it's what has made me successful in my current position. How people learn, how people interpret information, how people interact, whether it's with other people or themselves or inanimate objects or digital systems. That that whole list, that is how I was able to transition from working in education to UX design.